Quit your whimpering. Suit yourself. Mother.
Go home!
What if Spider-Man finally got everything he thought he wanted, and it still ended up feeling like a nightmare? Because that is exactly the vibe I get from Spider-Man: Brand New Day, and honestly, this first trailer does a lot more than just confirm Tom Holland's return. What I'm seeing here is a complete tonal shift for Peter Parker. This does not look like a victory lap. It does not look like the clean start some fans may have expected after No Way Home. It looks lonely. It looks unstable. And more than anything, it looks like Peter is about to pay the real price for becoming a hero in a world that no longer remembers the person behind the mask. That alone is a brutal setup. After the emotional destruction of Spider-Man: No Way Home, Peter Parker is back, but not in the way most people imagined. The first trailer for Spider-Man: Brand New Day finally gives us a real look at what his life has become after he made the ultimate sacrifice and let the world forget him. That decision saved reality, but it also erased his identity from the lives that mattered most. Now, years later, he is no longer balancing school, friends, romance, and superhero chaos in the same familiar way. Now he is operating alone. No Avengers safety net, no emotional home base, no easy return to normal. And the trailer makes sure I feel that immediately. This Peter is older, colder, more isolated. He is still protecting New York, but it no longer feels like the city is wrapping him in the same warm comic book optimism. It feels like he is surviving inside it. That difference matters, because Spider-Man has always been at his best when the mask gives him purpose, but the man underneath is falling apart. Brand New Day seems ready to push that idea harder than ever. And then the trailer drops the detail that really changes everything. Peter is changing, not emotionally, not symbolically, physically. At one point, his eyes appear to turn black. In another moment, he seems to wake inside some kind of cocoon. That is not small imagery. That is the kind of visual choice that tells me Marvel and Sony are not just continuing Peter's story. They are mutating it. There is something happening to him that goes beyond the usual superhero stress, and the trailer clearly wants me to sit with that discomfort instead of brushing past it. That is a fascinating direction. Because once Spider-Man stops being just a guy in a suit and starts becoming something more biologically unstable, the story immediately becomes more dangerous. Now the threat is not only out in the city, it is inside him. It is in his body. It is in the part of the character that has always separated Peter Parker from the cleaner, more polished superhero archetypes. Spider-Man has always been personal. Brand New Day appears to be taking that to a darker, more intimate place. And I think that is exactly why the trailer is getting such a strong reaction. This movie is not being sold as Spider-Man is back. It is being sold as Spider-Man is back, but something is wrong. That is how you get people talking. What also jumps out immediately is the scale of the supporting cast and what it says about the kind of MCU story this is trying to tell. One of the biggest reveals in the trailer is John Bernthal's Punisher showing up in a major way. And if that was not enough to get Marvel fans locked in, the footage makes their collision feel messy, aggressive, and completely different from anything we usually get in a Spider-Man movie. At one point, Frank Castle appears to nearly run Peter over with his van. That image alone tells me this film is willing to bring a much rougher street-level energy into Holland's corner of the MCU. That matters a lot. Because for years, fans have wanted to see Spider-Man exist more naturally beside the harsher Marvel Netflix-style characters, and now it finally looks like that wall is coming down in a serious way. Punisher is not just a cameo-friendly anti-hero. He changes the moral temperature of any story he enters. The second he appears, the world gets meaner. The choices get uglier. The violence feels less clean. And when you put a character like that next to Peter Parker, who is still fundamentally trying to hold on to some version of hope, you create instant tension. I want that tension. I want that discomfort. Because Spider-Man works best when he is forced to confront people and systems that do not play by his rules. Then there is Mark Ruffalo returning as Bruce Banner, and that detail may be even more important than it first seems. Peter apparently turns to Bruce for help, which instantly tells me this physical transformation is serious enough that he needs someone with deep scientific understanding and direct experience living with a body he cannot fully control. That parallel is smart. Bruce Banner is one of the only people in the MCU who can really understand what it means for your own biology to become a source of fear. And the trailer adds a small but telling emotional beat. Bruce seems to half recognize Peter, asking him what his name was. That one line is doing a lot of work. It reminds me that the spell from No Way Home is still hanging over all of this. Even when Peter reaches toward history, history cannot fully reach back. The people around him may feel that he matters, but they do not know why. That is a haunting position for a character like Peter Parker to be in, especially when he is clearly desperate for guidance. It gets even more painful when the trailer circles back to MJ and Ned. That part may be the emotional knife twist of the entire preview. Peter is clearly moving through a world where the two people who once defined his emotional center no longer truly know him. Zendaya's MJ appears again, but now there is distance there. Real distance. She is living a life that no longer revolves around Peter, and the trailer strongly suggests she now has a new boyfriend. If that detail lands the way it seems designed to, then Brand New Day is not just continuing the consequences of No Way Home. It is weaponizing them, because this is not the kind of loss you process once and move on from. This is the kind of loss that keeps happening every time you see the person who forgot you. And if the movie really commits to that pain, it could give Tom Holland some of the strongest emotional material he has had in this role. That is part of why this trailer feels different to me. It is not just interested in superhero escalation, it is interested in emotional aftershock. The spell in No Way Home was a massive, universe-level event, but the real tragedy was always personal. Peter chose isolation. He chose to disappear from the lives of the people he loved. Brand New Day seems determined to show what the choice actually costs when the adrenaline wears off and daily life sets in. That is a much more mature angle, and it is exactly what this franchise needed. The trailer also flashes several moments that seem to pull Spider-Man closer to the darker corners of Marvel television history. Peter is shown fighting Redclad Ninjas, which instantly sent fans into speculation mode about the possible return of the Hand. Whether that ends up being the exact organization or not, the visual language is unmistakably pushing toward that older Marvel Street World energy. That is a clever move, especially with Daredevil already back in the larger MCU conversation. It makes Brand New Day feel less like an isolated sequel and more like a junction point where different styles of Marvel storytelling can collide. That kind of crossover energy is dangerous if it becomes cluttered, but if handled correctly, it can make the world feel bigger and more alive. And based on the trailer, Destin Daniel Cretin seems to understand that balance. This is a very important detail. Brand New Day is the first Tom Holland Spider-Man movie not directed by John Watts. That alone makes it one of the most interesting Marvel projects on the board. Watts defined the tone of Holland's initial trilogy. He helped build the awkward charm, the youthful energy, the coming-of-age rhythm, and the MCU integration style that made those films feel distinct. But now that chapter is over. Peter is no longer the same kid, and the franchise seems to know it needs a different directorial voice to match that evolution. Enter Destin Daniel Cretin. He is not an outsider to Marvel. He already proved with Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings that he can handle blockbuster spectacle, character emotion, and clean action storytelling at the same time. But what makes him such an intriguing choice here is that he does not feel like a plug-and-play replacement. He feels like someone brought in specifically to reframe the energy of the franchise. And that is exactly what this movie needs to do. Because if Brand New Day looked and felt exactly like the previous 3 films, something would be wrong. Peter's life has been shattered. His personal history has been severed. His support system is gone. The visual language, pacing, and emotional atmosphere should change with him. A new director gives the movie permission to feel like the beginning of another phase rather than just the next numbered entry. And the trailer really does sell that new chapter feeling. It looks more intense, more physically strange, more emotionally bruised, more adult. That is not a bad thing. If anything, it may be the smartest thing this franchise could have done. So yes, I am locked in. Because this is not just about seeing Spider-Man return. It is about seeing what he had to become to survive the return. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments. This is where these kinds of films come to life. Until the next story, stay curious, be critical, keep your eyes on the screen, and remember, every film you haven't seen is a new film.